Welcome back to the channel. I'm actually done for the day. I had to shoot this out of order a little bit, and I'll go back and editing and put all the scenes in order. So welcome back to the channel. We got parts. If you watched my update from last night, because I was super excited, and I got a lot of good news to share. So check it out. Good morning, guys. As promised, we're going to get started hot and heavy here. Well, hot and I don't know about heavy, but in either case, here's what we got. So I cleaned the car off a little bit this morning just to prepare. We're going to go ahead and remove the turbo, what remnants of a turbo kit I have. Pull the intake manifold. We're going to pop out the fuel rails and just flip them over the windshield. That way I don't have to deal with disconnecting the fuel lines right now. Pull the harnesses, disconnect the starter. And that's pretty much it. Then it's ready to come out of the car. I will pull the intake manifold just to make my life a little bit easier. And I'll bolt it in the lifter valley, or what would be the lifter valley, and pull this thing out and put it over there. So the goal for the day is to get the new to me K member in the car, since that's really the focus of all of this. I discovered last night I don't have engine brackets they go from the engine to the motor mounts, which kind of a big deal, but we'll see. I will be able to compare the K members side by side, which I'll do that once I get it out, so it's easier to kind of see for you guys how different they are, and if you really need to order one on the outside, obviously. However, if you could at least get one like what I have, or take some really good measurements or get all the parts and just kind of work in reverse, that might help as far as building something that would make it easier for US cars to become all-wheel drive. And we'll see, obviously, once we get these things apart, how much more fruitful it might be to just use the K member I have from Australia as mock-up and just build a tubular K member of sorts to mount everything the way it needs to give everything the clearance that it needs. So we'll see. Outside of that, I'm gonna get off here and we get going. Alright, first thing I noticed here, I wanted to point out real quick about the shocks. So these are the shocks that are on the car. You see where the end link went for the sway bar. And then over here, where the brake line passes through with the ABS. Okay, so if you turn this way, which is how it's on the car, that's more or less the same. Okay, brake line passed through ABS. Brake line passed through ABS, if you can see it. Now, the big difference here is there's a tab welded on for the way that the end link goes, or it's like kind of like every other car, the Corvette and all that, where it's 290s, versus this one is straight, and then that was a 90, but I cut it off when I took the sway bar out. Outside of that, the top of the shock is the same, right? See the single bolt with the bushing and all that here? That's collapsed, clearly, that's bad. And then same thing up here, bolt nut retainer, and then if you take this off, it more or less looks the same. It's the same curvature on the bottom of the spring, right above that where that would go. Same thing up there. Okay, and then the big telltale is right here. See that with that lip on the up and bottom and how that's stamped? Lip on the bottom, how that's stamped. Same over here. And the other big telltale, well, we'll just lay this down. The other piece here is, if you notice on that steering knuckle with this adjustable bolt there, that's also the same, okay, as the American cars, because I'll show it to you right here. See that? So just something quick to point out here. All right, so another pause, another observation I want to make a note of real quick. So these K members are different, but they're a lot more similar in areas that matter than I thought, okay? So one of the other questions that came up that I touched on yesterday was the shocks. So check it out. So here, I got the camera kind of goofy, but it measures out about 2.5 inches, so you can see that, center to center, okay? Same thing over here. I'm gonna try to hold that, eyeballed it a little bit, about 2.5 inches, center to center, roughly. So theoretically, without putting it on the car, which I will here in a minute, these hubs, as far as the shocks are concerned, should be the same. Now, the other thing I want to take note of, oh, just drop that here. I was having issue with those brakes, or those wheels I bought rather, clearing this back with the shock body here. So check it out. So this here, it's about 2 inches from the back of the rotor to the face right about where the knuckle is, where that bolt screws in at. On this one, and I can't really get to it because of the dust shield, so that's probably another ½ inch or so. But, you know, factor in where the dust shield actually is, we're about 4 inches, 4 1/4 inches from the back of this rotor here to that spot there similarly. So the reason that's important is on those wheels I got, those Corvette wheels, I needed about 2½ inches, give or take, to make up space to make up before the hub would meet the inside of the rim to bolt down flush. That's why I bought these, because I was trying to estimate about where those wheels will end up. I'm still about 1/4 inch short. So what this means is the all-wheel drive K-member, like was already presumed before, or assumed rather, the wheels are pushed out probably about 2 1/4 inches as opposed to the rear-wheel drive model. That's good news for us because I already bought these wheels. So I'm already committed to using them. They were very expensive, and it's a setup I always wanted to run. So on the all-wheel drive front end, I'll be able to run this extremely aggressive wheel, albeit maybe with a little bit of a shim, but otherwise like it looks. So that's really exciting. The mounts more or less are the same. These look wider than that one, but that's because of this little space right here, that little about 2 inches or so of material. If you take that upper stamp piece where the bolt hole goes through and you compare it to that, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but they're more or less the same, roughly. That, and dozens of people have done this in Australia with this very same car, rear-wheel drive to all-wheel drive, and it bolts on there, so I don't have any reason to believe it'd be different. It looks different, but it's because it's configured a little bit different on the back side right here. See where that looks a little goofy as opposed to over here? Well, that's like that for a reason, because they moved the motor mounts from here to here so that make up that material loss from somewhere. So where they lose it here, where all this is put in there, they just boxed this in, brought this up and over to do the same thing without jeopardizing strength. Also, another observation, I noted yesterday there was a little bit of a divot here for the rack, right? Well, it's the same way on this one, right here. And it looks about the mounting points to be more or less the same. See that one there? And then that one's just underneath the rack there, you can't really see it. So, you see on the tail end, they didn't make any exceptions for us. This rack just sits right on the back side there, so it should make virtually no effect on this side, right? So that's exciting. The other thing, just eyeballing it, it looks like worst case scenario, if you look here where that rack strap is and where this box is, I should be able to either cut that bracket there and weld it over there, or move mounting points to move the rack over. Looks like it has to come over about from where it's at 3 or 4 inches here to clear the drive shaft, theoretically. I mean, I'll try some things once I get the rack in, or the K-member in the car, and we'll have the steering shaft as a reference, because obviously we can't move it too far if we have to move it, because, well, the steering shaft doesn't really move. But that's the big issue, is solving that problem. So I'm in no hurry to put this engine back in, which took all of 30 minutes to get out because there's nothing to it but electrical and fuel. I'm in no hurry to put that back in the car until we have a pretty good estimation on what it's going to take to make this rack clear, and that's a lot easier to do with everything out of the car. Now, if I can get a hold of a aluminum block, aluminum 453 or 48 block, which those are a dime a dozen, or even a blown up 6.0 aluminum block, like a bare block, just a block where I can slap this oil pan and the front diff and a little through coupler on the other side on to help average out, or estimate about where the engine's going to land. I'll get one of those, because those are a dime a dozen here in the States. And then I contacted Alex about the engine brackets. I'm waiting to hear back from him if I was supposed to get those or if that was an oversight or whatever. Either way, it's not a super big deal, because if I have to make them, whatever. It will be the first time in history somebody's had to make brackets for an LS car to put an engine in. But I would like to get the OEM brackets, so at least have a point of reference to see how much material they have in there, to see if maybe some material we can take out. And with that being said, I may have to just build brackets for this car to move the engine a little bit and to clear the drive shaft and the steering shaft or whatever. I don't know, but I would like to have the OEM bracket, so I, like I said, have a point of reference. So that being said, trying to think, I'm almost at my deadline. My goal was to have the new K-member in, the engine out, and the new K-member in the car by lunchtime, and it's almost 11. So we're moving pretty along. And actually, I'm at the point now where I just have to put the new to me K-member in. I'm going to use the engine crane for that. There. And I'm going to work smarter, not harder, and I'm going to clean up the garage a little bit, as you can see, and throw away some stuff and try to make more room. But once this K-member is in there, for the most part, it's going to be in there, at least for the time being. It'll probably come out a few times for fab or whatever, but we're going to just, you know, bolt it in there, not torque it, but just bolt it in place, take some measurements and see where we're at, try to figure out this drive shaft issue or steering shaft issue, since that's the talk of the town. Will the steering shaft allow me to work around this issue, or is it not really an issue at all? Looking at it, it's obviously some form of an issue because of how far over this is in the way. But like I said, looking at it, to me, this is a fairly minor issue, just moving the brackets to move this over enough to clear that shaft. Now, with that being said, a lot of people don't realize this. There's quite a bit of adjustment in these, like a lot of adjustment in those. I would say, roughly looking at it, probably about the distance I need to adjust, we could probably find in that. And if not, I'm sure I can figure out a sway bar end link, or not end, tie rod end rather, that's a longer for one side to get the length back that I need once you adjust these out, to slide this over, or get some sort of a kit, like a drag kit, to compensate the, you know, the rack having to be off center a little bit. But like I said, but at the same time, we have to remember that steering shaft itself is only going to move so much. And if so, I may have to get creative with the knuckle here, you know, maybe cut this, put an aftermarket double swiveling joint in there so that it allows me to get that range I need over here. I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot of different possibilities. I think it's fully doable. I don't think, with where technology is now and racing aftermarket is right now, that it's terribly difficult to figure out, one, how to reshape this or how to cut it and modify it to put another bendy joint in there, bendy joint, technical term, to get this to go from straight to, you know, over a little bit. I think it's totally doable. If you don't think it's doable, let me know. Tell me how dumb I am, whatever. But I'm gonna get back to it, and yeah. All right, almost done for today. I'm actually feeling pretty accomplished because I'm discovering a lot of things I had a question about. That so far, it's pretty good. So here's the other thing I discovered. If you remember, I wasn't 100% sure if the brakes would work, and as you can see, the brakes and shocks bolt up. And just as I suspected, this back here for the sway bar, since it's different at the top, it's different right here. But I'd be willing to bet that if I bought another set of GTO end links that go on this shock, I'm 99% positive it will hook up just fine. I mean, obviously you have to rotate the sway bar on both sides and everything to get it to connect, but I'm pretty darn sure that will work. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That's not what I'm excited about. So these brakes, try to get this in the camera as best I can, do bolt up. Both of the bolts bolt up. There's a little bit of a gap there, obviously, because it's not totally bolted down all the way. This dust shield's in the way. I just pulled this back a little bit just to kind of see if I can fit the calipers on there to see what they look like on the Adventure front end. And so this looks about right. If you see here, the contact patch of the pad that was on there versus the one that came off the GTO. You kind of see the rotor in there. These look like they will work if you had to. Contact patch wise, looks like they'll work, because remember, they're not totally settled where it needs to go, right? But material surface wise, let's see if I can get in here. It looks like the pad contact is right about where it needs to be on the rotor. Can't really see in there that well. Maybe in here. So it looks like it overhangs a little bit, but anyhow, that will, for right now, since I can, you know, finger tight them in there, I will temporarily mount the rotors that way and the calipers that way, because until we verify the steering issue, I'm not really worried about anything else. But being able to mount the calipers there allows me to test fit the wheels, because they're more or less where they need to be, and that's fine. If I have to run the calipers they came with, I have them right there, and the other one's over here somewhere. And that's just a matter of unbolting the brake hose and putting it on there. No big deal. But as far as not breaking braking system integrity, since I did bleed, these brakes do function, they are bled. Being able to haphazardly mount them this way saves me some time. The other thing I want to mention is, the only thing I had to do, at least on the passenger side, was loosen this adjustment bolt, which I'm assuming is camber to some degree, on the shock here. And then these two bolt holes lined up. These are the bolts that came out of the GTO suspension originally with the nuts and all that. And I just ugged them down real quick, backed this out once I got some lubricant on there. And I'm sure this will hook up to the rack just fine. But overall, like the Australians are saying, this looks like it was meant to be here. Now, the other thing I have to see is, they said, see how the K-member sits a little bit lower than factory. They say it's probably about 2 inches. I haven't measured it yet, but I'm going to see exactly how much lower it is compared to the rear-wheel drive version. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a difference, which just means that the lower front end of the car is going to be a bit lower. Now, this car wasn't that low to begin with. I want to say I put 3/4 inch or 1 inch drop springs. I don't think it was that much, but it was a little bit lower than stock. I didn't want Cholo low on this thing, no offense. Because I was going to drive it a lot, and in Europe at the time you couldn't have a super low car. So, but I'll worry about that once we verify the steering issue, and then we'll worry about ride height and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to check brakes or wheel clearance real quick to see how far out that this hub is pushed, and that may have fixed my issue of the rims touching the shock. If not, I do have the spacer, you can see right here, that I bought for these, trying to emulate what the front end was going to look like once it was on the car. Now that it's on the car, I'm going to go grab one of the wheels and test fit it and see where I'm at. But I think I'm about there, man. I am over the moon excited because a lot of this is kind of falling into place. I'll show you what the engine bay looks like real quick. Those are half shafts. Okay, those are all-wheel drive half shafts in place. Like I said, the whole K-member in and of itself looks a little bit lower than factory. Not so low that I can't compensate with a set of coilovers, because I have AFCO big guns in the rear, drag coilovers, but neither here or there. I have coilovers all the same. So I'll need to get front coilovers and then figure out what I'm going to do with the rears, probably sell those and get a set of just generic coilovers that mount in that position, and that'll match the fronts here, and then I'll be able to control ride height that way. Until then, I'm not terribly worried about it. But I mean, I could technically leave the big guns and just get some front shocks that are a little slightly more adjustable and just adjust them accordingly, since they're drag shocks. We'll figure it out when we get there. But so far so good. I'm going to put a little bit more time into this thing, and I'm going to call it a day and go hang out with the kids. Well, the littlest kid. The older two are playing video games, so I don't know. But yeah, so I'm going to get back at it, and I'll do my summary for the day and keep it moving. Alright guys, I have overshot. Well, actually, I made my deadline. My goal was to have the K-member and in the car and bolted in. I did that right about 12:10. But I kept going because I wanted to get the rack in and tie some things up and get a good look-see before I called it a day. So, here's what I got. Just like the Aussie said, this K-member literally bolts directly into place. It had no issues whatsoever. Like I said in the last little clip, I was even able to bolt the American shocks to the Adventura knuckles and put the adapters that I bought, I think it was 1.5 inch spacers, on the hubs to bring the wheels out some. And they poke out a little bit further than the rear. Also, number 2, the suspension's doing this number. It's not flat. So this is not, yeah, you can see there, that wheel is not flat. Once it's level, it's probably right about level, maybe 1/2 inch or so more than the rear. Obviously, we're going to run over fenders. And so the over fenders will compensate quite a bit for the tire. So the tire shouldn't poke out more than that. I want to say the Adventura and the Coupe 4 have like 2-inch factory flares that bolt on to the factory fenders to come out 2 inches. So the tire might be a little bit past that. Worst case scenario, obviously I can either get, well, I can't get a shallower adapter. I can get, you know, wheels that are custom fitted for an all-wheel drive GTO, which that's not in the budget. So we're just going to run this, and it is what it is. If I have to run like a Rocket Bunny or some really super aggressive fender kit to keep the wheels underneath, which I know they make at least 1 or 2 out there, I'll run that. That's the least of my concerns right now. What I am excited to share though is, as of right now, this looks like it will work. I kind of figured, if you see down there, it looks like the rack, even just to fit to connect up here, had to come over probably about 3 inches or so. But there's a spot to drill a hole and make a tab at the top there, and there's a spot to make a tab at the top and bottom to weld on this side. So in the scheme of things, as far as fabrication is concerned, that's really, really minor, like super minor as far as like fabbing and welding and cutting things. If you talk to anybody who works in the weld shop, that task in and of itself is simple, assuming it solves the problem. Because here's the thing. That motor mount sits over quite a bit of ways. And so does that one, because it's favored to the driver's side. Well, their passenger side, our driver's side, right? And I don't know in relation to this, and I guess I can go grab the front diff. I think I'll do that. I'll grab the front diff and kind of eyeball where that shaft needs to go. And if it looks like that's going to work, fuck it, man. I say we give it a shot. We can also come back and make custom engine mounts to bring this over some to help clear that, or bring that over maybe another 1/2 inch or so to bring it back behind that, because I have a little bit of wiggle room over there. And if I have to, because I can come over probably another 1/2 inch or so, or notch that if need be, as long as it doesn't put the steering shaft in a bind. Call me crazy, but I'm pretty freaking confident that the modifications necessary for this to clear are fairly minor. Labor intensive maybe, but I honestly genuinely feel they're going to be overall pretty minor. And that's saying a lot, because this is the big thing everyone's curious about. And if you are a fabricator, working a fab shop, or done the hot rods in any capacity, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking, which is it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but overall it looks pretty damn doable. So I'm excited for that. That's the big question everybody had. It's not solved. It's just, it's easier to see now that I have things on hand. And I'm going to grab the diff real quick and try to sit it up here and see what we got. All right, so I'm an hour past my be done by time, but I have a really good, exciting news to share. But anyway, without further ado, here's what I got. So I gently mocked everything up right about where it should sit, plus or minus a centimeter or two. And what's significant is, so I laid out the through shaft, which is attached to the front diff, and kind of just placed it, used the useless WRX cam to hold it up. And what I did was, if you see these notches here, that's right about, there's little disc in there, bearings, that they'll push in right about that far. And then there's a little boot and all that that'll go on there. So what I did was I make sure on both sides, that boot, same here, right about where that ring is, and these will push in right about there, okay? Try to make sure that depth-wise I was about the same on either side. Obviously this can come over a teeny bit, but it looks like right about that flat spot is probably about as far as they're gonna go here. Same on this side, right? Right about there. So it's about plus or minus a centimeter, it's about where it's gonna sit. But check it out. I fully believe this will work under two conditions. One, I'm going to have to get or fabricate a solid notched motor mount, right, This got a good notch in it to allow access for the power steering lines should I decide to run power steering, but we're not going to half-ass this. 2, this spins and touches a teeny bit. One of the lines come out of the here, but we can either 1, reroute that line, or 2, space this accordingly. But it's just as easy to pull these lines off and bend them up and out of the way, or come around underneath the bottom, whatever the case may be. But overall, looking at it, this looks like that's going to work. Let's see if I can get underneath here. There we go. This looks like that's going to work to me. Like I said, there's a little bit of interference to take into consideration. Anybody who's done hydraulic lines knows that moving these or rerouting these, bending these is not a big deal. I can get some brass ones actually and just rebend them, come, you know, this way down and around and over all the same to make sure this has maximum room to rotate with no issues. But looking at it, I think this is going to work. That's where the bottom, you know, flange will have to be welded there for the through bolt, and then on top, but that's fairly minor, all things considered. But I think that'll work. I absolutely think that'll work, and I'm excited. I'm excited. And like I said, it took 2 months to verify a hunch, but now the plan ahead is to execute said hunch. So I'm going to have to go to the parts store, buy, you know, take those lines off, buy brass versions of that same hydraulic line, pitch and everything, and length, because brass is just easier to manipulate than steel. Those are steel, but I mean, whatever. Run them down and around, and just come over sooner, right, or down around the back or whatever, to clear, and keep it moving, man. I'm excited. I really am. I didn't expect it to be, I won't say easy, but this straightforward. It was a hell of a risk, don't get me wrong. But looking at it, all things considered, depending on how low this thing sits when it's in the car, with the engine mounts or engine brackets, which I don't have, I think I'll be able to, between shimming the engine, between the bracket and the mount, notching them out and rerouting those lines and welding new brackets for the steering, I don't see a whole lot more needing to be done, because the geometry should be pretty close to what it is on the Adventure from factory. So that's what I got. If you watched it up to this point, thanks for sticking with me, for answering a question, really. And from here, I got to go get some materials, make a plan, start cutting some stuff, and go from there. There's no going back now. Oh, and clean. I'm going to have to clean this K-member pretty good. And wash all around and clean the areas I'm going to be cutting and welding at. And then mock it up and see what happens. But I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be okay. And anything that needs to be done, I feel like it's going to be pretty minor, all things considered. So next step is to get probably a dummy short block. Like I said, an aluminum block with nothing in it, just the block itself, to bolt to the oil pan that I have, so I can then place that in here with the engine bracket, so we can double check that our geometry is what I think it is before I cut anything. I don't want to cut and weld anything until I make sure that what I'm cutting and welding is exactly what I need to cut and weld, and that, you know, measure twice, cut once, basically. So now we go back to marketplace and find ourselves a empty block. But outside of that, thanks for watching.